All right. Tonight, we step into the heavy shadowed halls of Tudor England's final days of a towering king. You're there in 1547, the year Henry VIII's once mighty presence is shrinking, not just in stature, but in strength. The air is thick with a mix of incense sweat and the metallic tang of sickness hanging over Hampton Court like a stubborn fog. You probably won't survive this, at least not in the way Henry hopes to survive his own failing body. Subscribe quickly before you accidentally fall asleep and miss this creepy history story. Otherwise, who's going to tell you how King Henry died? Horribly. And don't forget to drop your location and local time in the comments. We're mapping out a world full of history-loving night owls. Now go ahead and kill the overhead light. Maybe throw a blanket over your shoulders or crack the window just a bit to let in that perfectly spooky breeze. It's story time. The horrible death of Henry VIII. You stand in the year 1547, a kingdom held in the grip of anticipation and dread. Henry VIII, once a dashing, athletic, golden-haired youth who could wrestle, joust, and dance like a dream, has become a very different figure. His broad shoulders, once a symbol of regal vigor, now strain under layers of fat, his belly swelling like a ship's hull taking on water. His legs, swollen and ulcerated, keep him confined mostly to a great creaking bed in Hampton Court. You can almost hear the groan of the timber beneath his weight as he shifts uncomfortably, his breath ragged. This is no peaceful passing. Henry's body is a battlefield. You can almost smell the sourness of festering wounds mingled with the heavy scent of medicinal herbs and burning candles meant to mask it all. The king, who once commanded armies and nations, now fights a more insidious foe, the slow, creeping decline of his own flesh. His face is swollen, his cheeks puffed with a pallor that betrays the health he desperately lacks. You catch glimpses of his once sharp blue eyes, dulled now, but still flickering with the fire of a monarch who knows the end is near. There's no heroic final battle here, no blazing glory, only the heavy, grinding agony of disease. Historians still argue whether Henry's final illnesses were purely physical or exacerbated by the weight of his psychological torment. Some suggest that his morbid obsession with control, coupled with the paranoia that had taken root in his later years, twisted his decline into a slow mental unraveling alongside the physical. By 1547, Henry is a man trapped by his own body, his reign shrinking as rapidly as his strength. His past victories over the Pope, over his wives, over the church, now seem like echoes from another lifetime. fading in the dim glow of flickering torchlight. You can hear the faint murmurs of the court beyond the heavy tapestries. Courtiers move like shadows, some hopeful, some fearful, all aware that the great Tudor era under Henry VIII is about to close its curtains. The air is thick with whispered speculation. Who will inherit this fractured kingdom? Who will survive the storm that Henry's death will surely unleash? But for now, it's just you, the fading king, and the slow ticking of a history that refuses to stop turning. Look closely at the man beneath the crown. He is the author of seismic shifts, breaking with Rome, igniting the English Reformation, founding the Church of England, and reshaping the monarchy's power forever. Yet here he lies, stripped of vigor, his body an unwieldy prison. The once athletic figure, famed for his jousts and hunts, now cannot rise from his bed without assistance. And that transformation, so stark, so tragic, didn't happen overnight. Years of indulgence in rich food, bouts of illness, injuries from jousting accidents, and perhaps diabetes and gout have ravaged his frame. His legs, swollen grotesquely, are said to be a nightmare to behold, wrapped in bandages and riddled with ulcers. The odor from them reportedly wafts through the corridors, a grim reminder of mortality's grip. There's an odd, almost dark humor in the fact that the king who once declared, "I will be a prince," and no subject, is now utterly subject to his failing flesh. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from earlier Tudor times. Not quite the miracle cure, and Henry's doctors tried countless remedies, some bordering on bizarre, that likely worsened his suffering. The king's medical attendants were as much alchemists as physicians, mixing concoctions that smelled of rot and desperation. Even in these grim moments, some say, Henry's spirit still flashes. His sharp mind, accustomed to wielding power with an iron fist, wrestles with frustration and fury. Paranoia gnaws at him, whispers of plots and betrayals swirling in his chambers. He's no longer the vibrant young monarch, but a man haunted by shadows, both real and imagined. It's said Henry's sense of identity was so tied to his physical prowess that his decline marked a kind of spiritual crisis. Did he fear oblivion more than death itself? Did the once mighty king grieve the loss of his own power as keenly as the pain in his legs? Historians still debate the psychological toll of his decline, whether his physical ailments drove him toward despair, or if his mental state worsened his health. Beyond the king's bedchamber, the kingdom is on edge. England has been through decades of upheaval, religious reforms, brutal executions, and shifting alliances. The king's death will open a power vacuum that promises chaos or a new order, depending on which faction you ask. The courtiers are restless. They gossip in hushed tones, eyes darting for favor and survival. You can almost feel the tension crackling like static before a storm. Some hope for the end of Henry's harsh rule. Others fear what his death might unleash. The Tudor dynasty's future hangs precariously, as if balanced on a knife's edge. The great Lion of England is near death, and the kingdom waits, breath held. In this moment, the contrast between Henry's past and present couldn't be starker. Once a symbol of youthful strength and charisma, his name was spoken with awe and fear across Europe. His marriages alone shaped the continent's politics. Yet here he is, a shadow of himself, his death imminent and horrible. The tale you're about to hear is not just of a king's demise, but of an empire's painful passage from one age to the next. So settle in and prepare yourself. You're about to walk through those final days, step by step, feeling the chill of history's darker corners. The story doesn't shy from the unpleasant. After all, it's called The Horrible Death of Henry VIII for a reason. But it's also a tale of power, ambition, fear, and the relentless march of time. You move quietly through the dim corridors of Hampton Court, where the echo of footsteps and the rustle of heavy velvet curtains mingle with the distant clatter of court life. The once vibrant routines of Henry VIII's daily life have begun to crumble like a house of cards in a storm. The king who once ruled with the energy of a man half his age is now confined to his chambers, his body increasingly betraying him. You watch as his attendants fuss nervously, their whispered concerns barely hidden beneath practiced smiles. Remember when Henry could leap from his horse sword in hand to join a jousting match or a hunt in the royal forests. Those days feel like a distant dream now, as you see him struggle even to sit upright. The great Tudor king, once renowned for his robust vigor and extravagant tastes, is now a shadow, bound by swelling limbs and aching joints. His daily rituals, once rigid and full of pomp, have faded into a slow, painful trudge from one moment to the next. The mornings, once filled with courtly ceremony and strategic counsel, now begin with the careful lifting of his swollen legs onto cushions. His physicians, an odd mix of traditional herbalists and early Renaissance doctors, hover nearby, debating the best way to ease his pain. Some suggest bloodletting, a practice Henry himself once endured with grim determination, while others propose poultices made from strange herbs, some rumored to be gathered from the farthest corners of the kingdom. The air is thick with the scent of these medicinal concoctions, a blend that might be meant to heal, but often just adds to the overwhelming atmosphere of decay. You notice the stark contrast in Henry's routine, from commanding armies to commanding his bedchamber nurses. The shift is brutal. His appetite has dwindled, replaced by bouts of nausea and discomfort, but he still demands to taste the rich foods he once adored: roast meats, spiced wine, and sweetmeats. Watching him try to enjoy these meals is bittersweet. The indulgences that once fueled his robust frame now seem cruelly out of place, like a feast for a king who cannot rise from his throne. The king's temper, famously fiery throughout his reign, has not cooled with his illness. You can hear the occasional sharp bark of orders, sometimes directed at servants who fail to anticipate his needs, or at courtiers who bring unwelcome news. Yet there are moments when his voice softens, almost pleading, as if the man beneath the crown is weary beyond words. It's a strange, unsettling mix of power and vulnerability. Historians still argue whether Henry's deteriorating health was hastened by his frustration and anger. Did his legendary temper exacerbate his physical decline? Or was it merely a symptom of the suffering he endured? Some suggest that the king's mind, once as sharp as a sword, was slowly dulled by pain and medication, leading to bouts of paranoia and confusion in these final days. The once bustling court itself is changing. Courtiers who used to vie openly for the king's favor now tread carefully. Some whisper of alliances and betrayals, others of secret prayers for a smooth succession. The mood is heavy with uncertainty, and you can sense the shifting balance of power as factions prepare for the inevitable transition. The usual courtly displays of music, dance, and celebration have all but vanished, replaced by a somber stillness that hangs over the palace like a funeral shroud. Yet even in this bleak setting, there are moments of odd normalcy. Servants scurry about, fulfilling their daily tasks. Children play quietly in the courtyards, and birds sing faintly in the gardens outside. It's as if life stubbornly insists on continuing, despite the gathering storm within the king's chambers. You find yourself wondering how a man so powerful could be reduced to this state. The transition from a vibrant monarch to a figure trapped in his own decaying body is heartbreaking and brutal. The rituals that once celebrated his strength are now reminders of his fragility. The grandiosity of the Tudor court contrasts sharply with the intimate suffering of its ruler. Among the peculiar details of this decline, one stands out: the king's frequent use of aromatic vinegar as a form of refreshment for his senses. While today it might seem odd or even unappealing, these vinegar-based concoctions were believed to stimulate appetite and clear the mind. Whether they helped or simply added to his discomfort is lost to time. But it's a quirky glimpse into the desperate measures taken to maintain his fading vitality. As you linger near the heavy velvet curtains, you hear a whispered conversation between two courtiers debating the king's prognosis. He may linger, yet for months, one says, but the shadow of death is closing fast. The other nods, adding, and with it, the future of England hangs in the balance. It's a reminder that Henry's failing body is not just a personal tragedy, but a national crisis. The daily collapse of Henry's routine is a slow-motion tragedy marked by small defeats and fleeting moments of clarity. You witness a man struggling to hold on to dignity and control in a world that is slipping away. Each day is a battle not fought with swords or armies, but with pain memory and the inexorable pull of mortality. So you watch, silent and steady, as the great Tudor king's routine dissolves into fragments of suffering and fleeting moments of grace. It's a sobering reminder that even the mightiest must eventually face their end. You lean in closer, drawn into the uncomfortable intimacy of Henry VIII's suffering. The king's pain is no secret, though its full extent remains hidden behind heavy curtains and guarded expressions. His swollen legs are a grotesque testament to years of neglect, injury, and disease. The ulcer's open wounds, festering with infection, seem to ooze a silent horror that even the most seasoned courtiers dare not describe aloud. You can almost smell the sour stench of decay, mixed with the overpowering aroma of herbal salves and burning frankincense meant to mask the rot. His body, once the epitome of Tudor strength, is now a cruel landscape of torment. The flesh is swollen and inflamed. His movements are restricted by unbearable pain. The king's usual fiery temper blazes intermittently, sometimes fueled by agony so intense it drives him to lash out at anyone nearby. Other times, he seems resigned, his sharp gaze dulled by the relentless assault on his body. You'd expect this to be a story of slow decline and quiet resignation. But Henry's case is anything but peaceful. His physicians attempted a range of treatments, some more harmful than helpful. The medical knowledge of the time was a patchwork of superstition, rudimentary anatomy, and earnest guesswork. Leeches were applied to drain what they thought was bad blood, and poultices made from bread, honey, and even crushed insects were spread over wounds in hopes of healing. Oddly enough, one fringe theory even suggested that the king's troubles were exacerbated by his previous jousting injuries, which had long been underestimated in their severity. Historians still argue whether the primary cause of Henry's leg ulcers was obesity-related diabetes gout, or chronic venous insufficiency. But all agree these festering wounds contributed heavily to his suffering. Some fringe researchers even speculate that he may have suffered from a form of compartment syndrome, a condition causing severe pressure and damage in the muscles, though this remains hotly debated. You witness how this physical torment shapes Henry's final days. The pain doesn't just eat away at his flesh. It gnaws at his spirit, twisting his mood between moments of rage and despair. His diet, once lavish and indulgent, has been reduced to small, manageable portions, though his appetite fluctuates wildly with his health. The king's caretakers try to tempt him with his favorite dishes, but even the most sumptuous roast or sweetmeats fail to entice the man now imprisoned by pain. The more you watch, the clearer it becomes that Henry's ailments weren't just bodily, they were deeply psychological. His mind, once sharp and commanding, shows signs of deterioration. Paranoia flickers in his eyes, especially as court intrigues swirl around him. Is he imagining plots against his life, or are his suspicions grounded? The line blurs. His temper flares unpredictably, leading to tense confrontations, even with those closest to him. Yet amid this grim scene, there's a curious historical footnote: the king's use of crocodile dung sunscreen, a bizarre medieval remedy applied to his skin to combat ulcers and sores. While it sounds like a terrible joke, the thick pastes were believed to draw out infection and soothe irritation, though modern science suggests they likely did more harm than good. It's a reminder that even royal medicine could be a mix of desperation and superstition. The toll on Henry's body is matched only by the toll on his reputation. His once imposing image, muscular, handsome and charismatic, is replaced by a grotesque caricature in the eyes of many contemporaries and later historians. Paintings from his last years show a swollen, red-faced monarch whose massive girth almost seems to consume the throne itself. You catch whispers among the courtiers about how Henry's health troubles began years earlier, fueled by injuries sustained during jousts and hunts. Some say that a violent leg wound never properly healed, turning septic and resulting in the chronic ulcers that would torment him to the end. Others mention his bouts of gout and possibly diabetes, a disease poorly understood then, but likely devastating for a man of his lifestyle. The complexity of Henry's illnesses makes it hard to pinpoint a single cause for his horrific decline. Historians still debate whether the weight of his political and personal burdens accelerated his physical deterioration. Was the relentless pressure to secure a male heir his multiple marriages, and the violent upheavals of the Reformation too much for any man? Or did his body simply betray him in the end, worn down by years of excess and injury? Despite the suffering, Henry clings stubbornly to life. His will to hold on to power and control, even as his body fails him, is palpable. You see moments when the king insists on hearing news from his court, issuing commands in his gravelly voice. These flickers of authority remind you of the man. He was a giant among kings, refusing to surrender until the very last breath. The king's death, when it comes, will be a slow, agonizing release rather than a sudden collapse. You're witnessing a final chapter filled with pain, resilience, and the crushing reality of mortality. It's a story that defies the typical heroic death. There's no glory here, only the stark, unvarnished truth of a man undone by his own body. So you settle back, knowing that this is just one part of a larger tragic tale, a tale that will continue to unravel the complexities of a king who reshaped England and left a legacy as complicated as his own demise. You find yourself drawn into the restless pulse of the Tudor court as Henry's health spirals downward. The once vibrant and boisterous palace is now a fragile cage of whispered schemes and shifting alliances, with courtiers moving like shadows, each seeking to read the fading monarch's moods and the future that will follow his death. The atmosphere is thick with tension, a cocktail of fear, hope, and opportunism swirling in every corridor. The court's usual grandiosity has dimmed. The daily pomp banquets and lavish entertainments have been muted to somber affairs or abandoned entirely. You can hear the soft rustle of silk gowns as nobles exchange cautious glances and half-spoken rumors. Everyone knows Henry is slipping away, and with his demise, the throne will be up for grabs in more ways than one. It's hard to imagine now, but the Tudor court under Henry VIII was once the center of cultural and political life in England. It was a whirlwind of poets, musicians, and diplomats, all eager to impress the king and secure their place in history. But as Henry's body betrays him, so too does the unity of his court. Factions form like storm clouds on the horizon, each jockeying for power, influence, and the favor of the next ruler. You notice the subtle shifts in alliances. Some courtiers cling desperately to the king's last favor, hoping to secure rewards before the inevitable succession. Others, more pragmatic, or perhaps more ruthless, quietly distance themselves, preparing for the day they might serve a new monarch. These whispered betrayals are almost invisible, but their impact is profound. It's a game of patience and cunning played out under the shadow of death. Historians still argue about the extent to which these court intrigues influenced the course of England's future. Some say the jockeying for power after Henry's death directly shaped the turbulent reign of his son, Edward VI, while others believe it was the king's own policies that set the stage for upheaval. Either way, the tension in the court is palpable, a powder keg waiting for a spark. Meanwhile, rumors swirl like wildfire through the corridors. Tales of secret meetings, forged alliances, and backroom deals become the currency of survival. You overhear murmurs that some courtiers are already plotting to control the young Edward Henry's only legitimate male heir, turning him into a puppet king to advance their own agendas. Others whisper about possible rebellions and religious uprisings fueled by the uncertain future of the English Reformation. The king's declining health only adds fuel to these fires. As Henry becomes less able to assert his authority, courtiers test boundaries, pushing for influence and power in subtle but unmistakable ways. The balance of power shifts daily, and no one feels truly secure. You glimpse Catherine Parr, Henry's sixth wife, moving cautiously among the nobles. Her role has shifted dramatically in these final days, from companion and nurse to a political actor trying to navigate the treacherous waters of a dying king's court. She's seen by some as a stabilizing presence, while others regard her with suspicion, questioning her influence and motives. Catherine walks a tightrope, balancing affection, fear, and ambition, all under the watchful eyes of those who would see her fall. In the midst of this turmoil, small acts of kindness and loyalty still flicker. A trusted servant quietly tends to Henry's needs. A lady-in-waiting offers a gentle smile to Catherine Parr, and a few courtiers show genuine concern for the king's suffering. These moments stand in stark contrast to the ruthless politicking around them, reminding you that even in dark times, humanity persists. There's an eerie quality to this court. In crisis, a world suspended between the past and an uncertain future. The grand tapestry of Tudor England is unraveling thread by thread, and you can feel the weight of history pressing down on every whispered word and furtive glance. Among the curious tidbits of this tense period is the fact that Henry's last court entertained bizarre spectacles intended to distract from the grim reality of his condition. Masks and performances were staged sometimes with grotesque or satirical undertones, reflecting the court's uneasy mood. It's almost as if the courtiers used these theatrical diversions to keep fear and despair at bay, at least for a little while. As you absorb the complex dance of power, loyalty, and survival, you realize this court is more than just a backdrop to Henry's death. It's a crucible where the future of England is being forged in real time, amid shadows and secrets. So you watch and listen and wait, knowing that every whispered plot and cautious alliance will ripple far beyond these palace walls, shaping the kingdom for generations to come. You sense the subtle shift in the palace air whenever Catherine Parr enters the room. The Queen Henry's sixth and final wife carries a quiet strength tempered by the delicate art of survival. Unlike some of her predecessors, Catherine doesn't just serve as a decorative presence or a pawn in dynastic politics. She's a woman of intellect and faith, carefully navigating the treacherous waters of a court teetering on the edge of chaos. You watch her move with a mix of grace and calculated caution, aware that every word, every glance could mean the difference between life and death. Catherine's role in Henry's final days is complex. She's both caretaker and political actor, tending to the king's frail body while managing his unpredictable temper and the swirling intrigues around them. She reads the signs of his suffering, how his mood can shift from irritability to melancholy in moments, and adjusts her approach accordingly. Sometimes she soothes him with gentle words or a touch on the hand. Other times, she must hold firm against his outbursts, a delicate balancing act of love-fear and pragmatism. You notice how Catherine's presence brings a rare calm to Henry's chambers. She encourages the king to engage with his spiritual reflections, supporting his renewed interest in religion during these twilight moments. Their conversations, though, guarded hint at a shared understanding that Henry's time is limited. Still, the Queen must maintain a careful front, lest she become the target of court factions eager to undermine her influence. Her survival depends on reading the subtle cues of court politics. Catherine knows better than anyone that in these final days, loyalties are fragile, and power can shift with a whispered rumor or a misplaced word. She keeps her circle small, relying on trusted allies, while keeping enemies at arm's length. The memory of previous queens, divorced, executed, or sidelined, looms large, reminding her that the stakes are high. Historians still debate how much genuine affection existed between Henry and Catherine in these final months. Some argue their relationship was largely pragmatic, a partnership forged out of necessity rather than passion. Others suggest a deeper bond with Catherine, providing the king a rare source of comfort amid his suffering. Regardless, her influence is undeniable, shaping not only Henry's daily care, but also aspects of his political will and legacy. One quirky detail stands out. Catherine was a notable patron of the arts and education, and during Henry's decline, she continued to champion the spread of Protestant ideas, subtly influencing the religious landscape of England. Her role as queen consort was more than ceremonial. She was an intellectual force, quietly steering the king's thoughts toward reform and reflection. You sense the burden Catherine carries, the constant tension between her duties as wife-queen and political player. Her every action is scrutinized, and her safety is never guaranteed. Yet she meets these challenges with a blend of resilience and tact, a survivor in a court where survival is the highest art. The Queen's careful management extends to the King's health as well. She advocates for treatments that might ease his pain, while gently discouraging more harmful or desperate remedies pushed by less compassionate courtiers or medical staff. It's a small but significant form of influence in a situation where control is slipping away. You catch glimpses of Catherine's private moments, quiet prayers, thoughtful reading, and whispered counsel with trusted confidants. These reveal a woman deeply aware of her place in history and determined to leave a mark beyond mere survival. Yet even Catherine cannot fully shield Henry from the physical and emotional toll of his decline. The king's moods fluctuate unpredictably, his strength wanes, and the shadow of death grows ever larger. The queen's role is both anchor and shield, but she knows that soon all her efforts may be in vain. Among the debates surrounding Catherine's influence is the question of how much she shaped Henry's final political decisions. Some scholars argue she played a key role in guiding his thoughts toward a smoother succession, while others see her more as a comforting presence than a political strategist. Either way, her presence in these final days is a quiet yet potent force. As you watch her navigate this perilous chapter, you appreciate the delicate dance of power, love, and survival playing out behind the closed doors of Henry's chambers. Catherine Parr is not just a queen in name, but a remarkable figure standing at the crossroads of a dying king's life and the birth of a new era. So you keep your eyes on Catherine, knowing that in the final days of Henry VIII, the Queen's quiet strength may prove as crucial as any sword or crown. You're drawn into the strange world of Tudor medicine, where hope and desperation mingle like the pungent herbs hanging from ceiling beams. Henry VIII's attendants, desperate to stave off his relentless decline, administer a series of treatments that range from the orthodox to the outright bizarre. The king's body, swollen and ravaged by ulcers, is subjected to remedies that today might read as medieval madness, but back then were cutting edge, or at least what passed for it. The medical care begins with diet, because even a king can't ignore the basics when his body is breaking down. But Henry's relationship with food in these final days is a complicated tango. His appetite waxes and wanes unpredictably, and his favorites, roasts, sweetmeats, rich pies, remain on the menu, despite his inability to digest them well. His physicians recommend bland broths and watered-down wines to ease his digestive troubles. Yet the king insists on his indulgences, a stubborn grasp on pleasures that remind him of better times. You can almost see the pile of dishes brought to his bedside only for the king to push them away. Moments later, his swollen hands too weak or painful to lift utensils. Feeding a man of Henry's size and condition is no small task, and his attendants must balance nourishment with patience, often resorting to feeding him by spoon or with soaked bread. It's a humbling reversal for a man used to commanding armies and banquets alike. Then come the treatments that seem more theatrical than therapeutic. Leeches, those infamous bloodsuckers, make their appearance with regularity. The theory remove excess or bad blood to restore balance. The sight alone, a king subjected to leeches, is jarring, and the reality even more so. The leech's bites leave swollen marks, and sometimes cause infections that only add to his suffering. Among the stranger remedies you hear about is the use of poultices made from strange ingredients like crushed earthworms, honey, and even crocodile dung. Yes, crocodile dung. It was believed to have healing properties, acting as an antiseptic or barrier to infection. You might wince imagining the application of such a paste to the king's festering wounds. But in a time before antibiotics, these remedies were desperate attempts at control. Historians still argue whether these treatments hastened Henry's decline or offered him any relief at all. Some scholars believe the relentless application of such remedies likely aggravated his ulcers and general health, while others suggest they may have provided temporary comfort or reduced inflammation. The truth probably lies somewhere in the messy middle. You catch a glimpse of the king's doctors, learned men in elaborate robes, juggling medical texts, astrology charts, and traditional herbal lore. They consult with apothecaries, mixing potions in dimly lit chambers, hoping against hope to find a cure, or at least a balm for the king's agony. The line between science and superstition blurs in these shadowed rooms. You also learn of the king's reliance on baths infused with fragrant oils and herbs meant to soothe his aching limbs and refresh his spirits. While these must have offered brief respite, they also highlight the limits of medical knowledge at the time. There was no true understanding of infection or chronic disease, only trial error and hope. One particularly odd detail is the king's use of a special ointment made from mummified human remains, powdered mumia, believed to have miraculous healing powers. While this might sound macabre now in Tudor England, such remedies were prized for their supposed potency, blending alchemy with medicine in a search for longevity. Despite the abundance of treatments, you see how Henry's condition deteriorates relentlessly. The ulcers worsen, his strength fades, and the balance of his body's humors grows ever more skewed. The physical pain, compounded by mental anguish, creates a feedback loop of suffering that none of the remedies can break. And yet, in moments between the agony and confusion, Henry still exercises his royal prerogative. He demands new medicines, insists on consulting his physicians, and orders experiments with treatments that sound more like witchcraft than science. His stubborn will to live battles the cruel realities of his failing body. You can almost hear the doctors muttering in frustration as the king dismisses safer treatments in favor of riskier concoctions, hoping for a miracle. It's a tragic dance of hope and despair, science and superstition, authority and helplessness. The attempts to feed the beast, this massive, ailing king, become symbolic of the larger struggle, the fight to hold on to life, power, and dignity in the face of unstoppable decline. His body, once a temple of strength and ambition, is now a battleground for remedies, both sensible and strange. As you take it all, in the poultices, the leeches, the strange potions, you realize that Henry's horrible death is not just a story of disease, but also of the limits of human knowledge and the fierce, often desperate desire to hold death at bay. So you watch, unsettled but fascinated, as the royal household attempts to patch together a fading king with the curious medicine of their time, even as the inevitable draws near. You can feel it now, a shadow thickening in the palace corridors, and in the very air you breathe. The shadow of death, long looming, has settled with an oppressive weight. Henry VIII's condition is no longer a whispered secret. It's a palpable, suffocating presence that colors every glance and silences every conversation. The great king's slow slide toward his final breath has become the single, all-consuming reality within these walls. You watch as courtiers move with more urgency, their eyes darting between one another and the king's chamber door. Fear and fascination mingle in the hushed voices that ripple through the palace. Some speak of the king's imminent death with dread, others with opportunistic calculation. The atmosphere is electric, with the knowledge that everything is about to change. The king himself is a pale shadow, his strength draining away with each passing day. You see the hollowed cheeks beneath the swollen flesh, the glazed look in his eyes, as pain and fatigue wage a relentless war within. His once thunderous voice is reduced to weak commands or incoherent muttering. The grandeur of his reign is unraveling before your very eyes. Historians still debate how much Henry was aware of his approaching end. Did he grasp the full weight of his mortality? Or was he trapped in denial, clinging to the vestiges of his former power? Some sources suggest moments of clarity and acceptance, while others recount episodes of rage and despair. It's a haunting ambiguity that adds to the tragedy of his final days. You notice how the king's bedchamber becomes a theater of ritual and tension. Servants and physicians attend to him with a mixture of reverence and anxiety. Candles flicker in the dim light, casting dancing shadows on the tapestries that once celebrated triumphs, now tinged with the imminence of loss. The heavy scent of incense and herbs tries and fails to mask the smell of decay and despair. Outside the room, courtiers gather quietly, exchanging nervous glances and clipped words. The court is a pressure cooker, simmering with the anticipation of power shifts and the fear of uncertainty. Some prepare for the transition with careful plans. Others pray silently for mercy or divine intervention. The entire kingdom seems to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable. You catch fragments of conversations about the succession, about the young Edward, about the stability of the realm. The fear of civil unrest and religious upheaval looms large. Henry's death is not just a personal loss, but a turning point for a nation on the brink of transformation and turmoil. There's a macabre element to this, waiting a surreal dance between life and death. The king's pulse flickers, and every breath seems to stretch time taut, as if the world itself is reluctant to move forward without its ruler. You can almost hear the silent countdown ticking in the quiet spaces between whispered prayers and measured steps. Oddly, amid this dread, there's an eerie calm in some moments. The king's breathing steadies, briefly. A faint flicker of his old vigor shines in his eyes, offering false hope. These brief respites deepen the suspense, tightening the grip of fear and anticipation on everyone present. You remember the strange contrast to Henry's earlier life, the robust jousts, the lavish feasts, the commanding presence, and now the fragility of this man who shaped history with an iron will is laid bare in his suffering. It's a sobering reminder that even kings are not immune to the merciless hand of fate. Among the curious details of this shadowed time is the use of special prayers and rituals performed by the king's chaplains. These rites, meant to ease the soul, and prepare it for judgment are steeped in a mixture of hope and dread. Some courtiers take part with genuine faith. Others see them as desperate acts of denial. You sense that the king's slow journey toward death is more than physical. It's spiritual, psychological, and political. The fragile line between life and death is crossed and recrossed in the silent moments of the night, where time seems to stretch and contract with the rhythm of the king's fading heartbeat. So you stand there, a witness to this delicate balance, knowing that soon the shadow will fall completely, and history will move on to a new chapter, marked by grief, chaos, and the echoes of Henry's terrible final days. You settle in close, the heavy curtains of Henry's chamber barely muffling the weight of his confessions and regrets. The king, once so confident and commanding, now confronts the specter of his own mortality with a rare vulnerability. In these final days, Henry's mind drifts beyond the physical pain, wrestling with the ghosts of his past and the uncertain legacy he will leave behind. He reflects on the wives he has married, divorced, and in some cases executed. The personal costs of his relentless pursuit of a male heir haunt him, and you can almost hear the silent echoes of Anne Boleyn's footsteps in the dim corridors. It's a stark contrast to the king who once thundered through courts and councils, now reduced to pondering the human toll of his ambitions. Was it worth it? The question lingers unanswered, but heavy. Henry's spiritual turmoil intensifies. His break from Rome, once a bold assertion of authority, now feels like a double-edged sword. He wrestles with the weight of heresy accusations and fears for his soul's salvation. The theological debates he once engaged with fiercely are now quiet, intimate dialogues between himself and his chaplains. These moments reveal a man seeking peace in faith, even as his body fails him. Historians still argue about the sincerity of Henry's late religious convictions. Was he genuinely repentant, or merely seeking a way to secure his legacy? Some suggest that his harsh policies toward Catholics and Protestants alike were born of fear rather than conviction. Whatever the truth, these confessions add a human dimension to a king often remembered for his ruthlessness. Politically, Henry's regrets include the turmoil his reign unleashed, shifting alliances, rebellions, and the seeds of division that will haunt England for generations. His mind lingers on his son Edward, the fragile hope for continuity, and the fragile peace he hopes to pass on. The burden of securing the Tudor dynasty weighs heavily. You catch glimpses of Henry's conversations with trusted advisors, where he voices concerns about the future. These final dialogues hint at a monarch still trying to control the narrative of his reign, even as his influence wanes. It's a poignant struggle, a last grasp at authority in a world slipping away. Among the odd historical notes is the king's fascination with the afterlife, which intensifies during these days. He orders prayers and masses for his soul and commissions religious texts to guide him through what he hopes will be a peaceful passage. These acts blend hope, fear, and a desire for redemption, adding layers to his complex character. You sense the contradictions in Henry's final reflections, a man who was both tyrant and penitent conqueror, and deeply flawed human being. His confessions reveal the messy, often painful truth behind the legend. As the days pass, Henry's regrets deepen, but so does a quiet resolve. He prepares not just for death, but for how he will be remembered. The weight of history presses down, and he fights to shape his legacy even from the edge of oblivion. So you listen closely, bearing witness to a king's last reckoning, a moment where power yields to reflection, and the man beneath the crown reveals his final truths. The atmosphere thickens as Henry VIII draws near the final moments of his turbulent reign, and you find yourself caught in the intimate swirl of his last commands. Though his body weakens, his mind sharpens with a clarity born of the knowledge that time is running out. You hear the gravel in his voice as he dictates instructions, not just for his immediate care, but for the future of England itself. Henry's final orders are meticulous and deliberate. He calls for the careful preparation of his will, the safeguarding of his young son Edward, and the preservation of the Tudor legacy at all costs. The king is keenly aware that his death will unleash forces beyond his control, and he strives to impose order on chaos with the last of his strength. You observe the tension as courtiers and advisors receive these commands. Some nod solemnly, understanding the gravity, while others exchange furtive glances, aware that the king's passing could be their chance to rise or fall. The atmosphere is charged with a sense of impending change, the calm before a storm that will reshape the nation. Historians still debate how much Henry's final wishes influenced the succession and the political landscape that followed. Did his directives truly secure a smooth transition, or did they sow the seeds of future conflicts? Scholars argue over the authenticity and impact of certain documents, reflecting the murky politics of the time. Among the king's last concerns is the protection of the Church of England, a bold institution he forged from his break with Rome. He commands his successors to uphold the faith and maintain religious reforms, aware that religion will remain a fault line in England's future. It's a testament to his enduring ambition that even in death, he seeks to control the spiritual destiny of his realm. You hear him speak of his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, both sidelined by his obsession with a male heir, but nonetheless key figures in his legacy. His final commands hint at a cautious recognition of their importance, an uneasy acceptance that their fates will shape England in ways he cannot foresee. In quieter moments, Henry reflects on his own mortality and the fragility of power. The king, who once declared himself supreme ruler of England, now faces the ultimate surrender, instructing those around him on how to remember him and maintain stability after he is gone. A quirky historical tidbit you encounter is the king's insistence on having his funeral arrangements detailed well in advance, an elaborate spectacle befitting a monarch who understood the power of image and legacy. His instructions include precise details about the procession, the music, and even the display of his tomb, signaling his desire for eternal remembrance. As you absorb the gravity of these last acts, you feel the weight of a ruler trying to bend the course of history, even as his own story nears its close. Henry's final commands are a blend of hope, fear, and unyielding will, a last assertion of control over a kingdom and a life that will soon be irrevocably changed. So you stay with the king in these final hours, listening to the echo of his voice and the imprint of his decisions, knowing that the end is near, but the legacy is just beginning to unfold. You are right there. As the day Henry VIII dies unfolds, a day heavy with portent tension and a slow unraveling of a giant who once ruled with iron will and boundless energy. The atmosphere in Hampton Court is thick with a mix of anxious silence and barely concealed grief, the courtiers moving carefully as if even a wrong step might hasten the inevitable. The morning begins with the usual but strained routine. Henry's breath is shallow and uneven, his massive frame barely responding to the efforts of his attendants. His eyes flutter open intermittently, reflecting a fading spark of the indomitable spirit that once made him the most powerful man in England. You can almost feel the house holding its collective breath, waiting for the final moment. As the hours drag on, the king's condition worsens visibly. The swelling in his legs grows more grotesque, and the ulcers weep more freely. The foul smell, which had been concealed beneath incense and herbs, becomes harder to mask. The room's heavy velvet drapes seem to absorb the heaviness, casting shadows over the king's still form. You hear the soft murmur of prayers from the chaplains, their voices wavering between hope and sorrow. The king's breathing is labored now, punctuated by occasional coughs that rattle deep in his chest. It's a brutal reminder that the man who once toppled popes and shaped nations is now utterly at the mercy of his failing body. There are moments of fleeting consciousness when Henry attempts to speak, but the words come out in fragments, commands farewells, or perhaps reflections. His attendants strain to catch his meaning, aware that every syllable could be his last. The tension in the room tightens, as if time itself is stretching thin. Historians still debate the exact timeline and nature of Henry's final hours. Some accounts speak of a peaceful passing, while others describe a more agonizing end. What remains clear is the overwhelming human frailty behind the legend. The king's death was no glorious battlefield collapse, but a slow, grinding surrender. Outside the chamber, news of the king's condition spreads quickly through the court. Courtiers gather in hushed groups, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The reality that the Tudor age under Henry is ending settles like a heavy fog over the palace. You witness the quiet but profound impact on those around him. Some shed tears openly. Others maintain stiff upper lips, aware that mourning must soon give way to political maneuvering. The king's death is both a personal loss and a seismic shift in the balance of power. One curious detail you pick up on is the presence of a small group of loyal guards and servants who remain by Henry's bedside until the very end, refusing to leave, even as the mood turns grim. Their devotion speaks to a loyalty that transcends politics, a human connection amidst the cold calculations of court life. As the final breath escapes Henry's lips, a stillness falls over the room, profound and almost sacred. The great Tudor king, whose life was marked by triumph and terror, power and pain, is gone. The silence that follows is heavy with both relief and loss. You are left with a complex mole of emotions, awe at the end of an era, sorrow for the man beneath the myth, and a keen awareness of the storms yet to come. Henry's death is not just an end, but the opening of a new, uncertain chapter in England's history. So you stand witness to the slow unraveling of a giant, a king brought low by the very body that once carried him to greatness, knowing that the story of Henry VIII's death will echo through time, shaping the future in ways both seen and unseen. You feel the shock ripple through Hampton Court like a sudden chill as news of Henry VIII's death spreads. The king, once the unshakable center of England's world, is now silent forever. And the court, once a hive of whispered plots and restless ambition, erupts into a kaleidoscope of reactions. Some faces are pale with grief, others flush with barely concealed hope, and a few wear expressions that blend the two into something darker, more calculating. The death of a monarch is never a quiet event, but Henry's passing sends shockwaves far beyond the palace walls. Courtiers and nobles scramble to secure their positions, knowing that the delicate balance of power will soon be rewritten. You witness whispered alliances forming and old grudges flaring to life as everyone attempts to read the new map of influence and favor. You overhear conversations speculating on the young Edward Henry's only legitimate son and the immense responsibility now resting on his fragile shoulders. Questions abound. Who will guide the boy? King. Which faction will control the regency? The uncertainty breeds anxiety, but also opportunity. The seeds of future conflict are sown in these tense, uncertain hours. Historians still argue about the immediate political fallout of Henry's death. Some see a smooth transition facilitated by careful planning and loyal advisors, while others highlight the instability and factionalism that eventually plunged England into turmoil. What's clear is that Henry's death was a catalyst, a trigger for change that reshaped the country's destiny. Beyond the court, word spreads quickly to the towns and countryside. For many common people, the news is met with a mix of fear and curiosity. Henry's reign had been marked by sweeping religious reforms and harsh punishments, and the future feels uncertain. You imagine conversations around hearth fires. Will the new king be merciful? Will the church's direction shift? The ripple effects of this death extend far beyond the palace gates. Amid the political whirlwind moments of genuine mourning surface, trusted servants, long loyal to the king, gather quietly to remember the man behind the crown. These small, intimate acts of grief stand in stark contrast to the grand pageantry that will soon follow, but hint at the complicated humanity beneath Henry's fearsome reputation. One quirky detail emerges. Despite his brutal reputation, Henry's death prompts an outpouring of artistic tributes, including poems and songs that capture both his grandeur and his tragic decline. This blend of reverence and melancholy reflects a nation grappling with the loss of a complex monarch. You also notice how quickly rumors and myths begin to swirl. Some claim to have seen omens or portents. Others whisper about secret wills or hidden heirs. The line between fact and fiction blurs as the story of Henry VIII's death takes on a life of its own. In the midst of this chaos, you sense the immense weight of history pressing down. The king is dead, but his influence lingers, shaping the course of events and the minds of those who must now fill the void. The court and the country stand at a crossroads, poised between continuity and upheaval. So you observe, absorbing the raw energy of this moment, the end of an era, and the uncertain dawn of another, all sparked by the horrible death of Henry VIII. You find yourself amidst the grandeur and somber ritual of Henry VIII's funeral, the final haunting spectacle designed to immortalize a king whose life was as theatrical as it was tumultuous. The day is heavy, with a mix of solemnity and pageantry, a carefully choreographed display that aims to mask the raw grief and uneasy uncertainty beneath the surface. The procession moves slowly through the streets of London, a long line of mourners and nobles trailing the king's coffin, draped in rich velvet and adorned with gilded and jewels. You can hear the measured steps of the pallbearers, the tolling of bells, and the muted sobs of those left behind. The air is thick with incense, the smell both a tribute and a veil over the more human sense of sorrow and decay. Spectators line the streets, their faces a patchwork of awe-fear and respect. For many, this is the last chance to witness the passing of a monarch who reshaped England for better or worse. The spectacle is as much about power as it is about mourning, a final assertion that Henry VIII, despite his mortal frailties, remains a towering figure in history. Inside Westminster Abbey, the ceremony unfolds with an eerie blend of religious ritual and royal pomp. The clergy chant prayers, the choir's voices echoing off stone walls, while noblemen in elaborate robes stand in silent vigil. You notice the intricate details of the king's tomb preparations, designed to convey both majesty and the solemnity of death. Historians still debate the symbolism of Henry's funeral. Some see it as a triumphant affirmation of Tudor power, while others interpret it as a thinly veiled attempt to mask the instability beneath the surface. The lavishness contrasts starkly with the king's brutal final days, revealing the dual nature of his reign: glory intertwined with suffering. One quirky aspect of the funeral was the inclusion of elaborate effigies, life-sized representations of the king in full regalia, meant to stand eternal guard over his tomb. These wax figures were so lifelike that some contemporaries found them unsettling, a ghostly reminder of mortality, frozen in time. You observe the somber faces of Henry's family, including his children, Mary and Elizabeth, who stand as living legacies of his tumultuous marriages and political decisions. Their presence is a poignant reminder of the personal cost behind the public spectacle. The funeral also serves as a stage for political signaling. Powerful nobles and church officials use the occasion to display loyalty or assert influence. Their subtle maneuvers woven into the fabric of ceremony. The balance of power feels as delicate as ever, even in death. Outside the abbey, the streets are quieter now, but the memory of the spectacle lingers. The king's death and funeral become part of the collective consciousness, a story retold and reshaped in years to come. You can almost feel the weight of history pressing down in that moment, a mixture of reverence, fear, and the eerie finality of a chapter closing. So you watch the grand procession fade into memory, the echoes of prayers and footsteps marking the end of Henry VIII's reign and the beginning of a new, uncertain era. You step back from the heavy stones of Westminster Abbey and into the swirling mists of legend and myth that grew thick around Henry VIII's death like a second shroud. The king's passing quickly became more than history. It morphed into folklore, rumor, and a tapestry of stories that blur fact and fiction in equal measure. The first whispers were simple exaggerations, tales of Henry's monstrous size, his terrifying temper, and the horrible smells emanating from his ulcers grew into vivid stories told around fires and in taverns. You might hear that he died clutching a bag of gold, or that his massive weight caused the floorboards of his chambers to creak ominously, threatening collapse. These factoids stick in the popular imagination despite their dubious accuracy, showing how the grotesque and sensational overshadowed the man himself. The king's death also sparked more fanciful legends. Some claimed that Henry's ghost haunted Hampton Court, his spectral form wandering the halls in eternal unrest. Others whispered about secret tunnels and hidden treasures buried with the king mysteries that have fascinated treasure hunters and historians alike for centuries. Historians still argue over how much these legends distort the truth. Was Henry's decline really as horrific as the tales suggest? Or have later storytellers amplified the most gruesome details to suit their own narratives? Some scholars suggest that these myths serve to humanize a monarch, often remembered only as a tyrant or larger-than-life figure, while others warn that they obscure the complex realities of his reign and death. Among the more bizarre myths is the story that Henry died from overindulgence in a particular dish. Some say lamprey, others a rich pie, adding a touch of dark comedy to an otherwise tragic story. Whether true or not, this anecdote highlights how Henry's love of food and excess became entwined with the story of his demise. You notice how these stories, true or not, reflect a broader cultural fascination with the grotesque and the tragic. Henry VIII's death becomes a symbol of the dangers of excess ambition and the frailty beneath royal power. It's a reminder that even the most powerful are vulnerable to the slow, inexorable march of time and disease. The enduring popularity of Henry's story in history, books, plays, and later films owes much to these myths. They provide a dramatic, humanizing narrative that captures the imagination, blending horror and empathy in a way that pure historical facts sometimes cannot. You realize that the line between history and legend is porous, shaped by the stories we tell and retell. Henry VIII's horrible death is both a fact of medical decline and a canvas for cultural storytelling, colored by fear, fascination, and the timeless allure of a tragic end. So you lean into the myths as much as the truths, knowing that both are part of what makes Henry's story so compelling. A reminder that history is not just about dates and events, but the stories we carry forward through time. You find yourself stepping into the scholarly arena where historians, doctors, and biographers continue to debate the exact causes and nature of Henry VIII's horrific decline. Even centuries later, his final years remain a puzzle, one piece of Tudor history that refuses to settle into neat consensus. Medical experts pore over descriptions of his symptoms: swollen legs, ulcers, obesity, and bouts of fever, to diagnose conditions with the benefit of modern science. Was it diabetes, exacerbated by his notorious love of rich food and inactivity? Gout, triggered by his injuries and lifestyle? Or perhaps chronic venous insufficiency, a condition where poor blood flow causes swelling and wounds? Some fringe theories suggest rarer diseases or combinations of illnesses, but none have definitive proof. Historians debate how much Henry's mental state influenced his physical health. Was his paranoia and erratic behavior a result of brain damage, chronic pain, or the psychological toll of ruling a kingdom in constant upheaval? Some argue that his infamous temper was worsened by depression and anxiety conditions only recently understood in medical science. The political context also factors into these debates. Scholars examine how the immense pressures of Henry's reign, religious reforms securing a male heir court, intrigues, may have accelerated his decline. Was his horrible death an inevitable biological tragedy, or a reflection of the unsustainable weight of power? You overhear arguments about the reliability of sources. Tudor chroniclers often wrote with political motives, coloring their accounts with bias. Some accounts might exaggerate his grotesque appearance or health troubles to diminish his legacy or bolster others. The debate itself becomes a lens through which to view how history is constructed and contested. Amid these serious debates, you find quirky scholarly tidbits like discussions about how Henry's fondness for certain foods could have contributed to his ailments. Lampreys, for example, which he famously adored, are high in cholesterol and could have worsened his condition. Some medical historians even analyze his diet's effects on gout and obesity. You note that this ongoing debate is a reminder that history is never static. Our understanding of Henry VIII's death evolves with new discoveries, interpretations, and scientific advances. The layers of myth, medical mystery, and political drama continue to intertwine, challenging simple narratives. The enduring fascination with Henry's horrible death is a testament to how the end of a king's life can illuminate broader questions about power, health, and human vulnerability. His story invites us to explore not just what happened, but why, and what it means for how we understand history. So you sit with the arguments, the uncertainties, and the fascinating contradictions, knowing that the debate itself is part of Henry's continuing legacy, a puzzle that invites each generation to reconsider the man behind the crown and the nature of his terrible decline. You let yourself drift into the soft, fading echoes of Henry VIII's life and death, feeling the heavy pulse of history slow into a gentle heartbeat. The king who once roared across Europe now lingers in memory, a figure both immense and fragile. His story, marked by triumphs and terrors, excess and remorse, comes to rest in the quiet space between legend and reality. You reflect on the strange comfort found in his final days, how even a man as powerful and feared as Henry must surrender to the slow, inevitable approach of death. There's a humanizing grace in that surrender, a reminder that beneath crowns and conquests, we are all subject to the same fragility. The echoes of Henry's reign ripple through history, shaping religion, politics, and culture for centuries to come. His life and horrible death are inseparable threads in the fabric of England's story, a testament to the complexities of power and the limits of control. Historians remind us that Henry's legacy is a puzzle of contradictions, his ruthless ambition paired with moments of genuine reflection, his grandeur shadowed by personal suffering. You realize that understanding his death helps illuminate the man himself, revealing the deep layers beneath the kingly facade. You imagine the stillness that followed his passing, the slow unfolding of a new era under Edward VI, and the turbulent times that would test the Tudor dynasty's survival. Henry's death was not an end, but a beginning, a turning point that echoes through the centuries. As you close this chapter, you feel a quiet reverence for the story told, the lives touched, and the history made. The horrible death of Henry VIII is more than a tale of pain and decline. It's a reflection on power mortality and the enduring human spirit. Now let the story settle like a gentle shadow as you prepare for rest. Breathe in the calm. Let the vivid images fade softly, and know that the past is never truly gone. It lives in every whispered legend and every thoughtful reflection. Sleep well, and may your dreams carry you through the corridors of time, where kings and commoners alike face their final journey with courage and grace.